The small wooden house perched precariously on the mountainside. Like an old box someone had forgotten in the forest, the wind swept through the cracks in the door every morning, carrying the creaking of rotting wood and the musty smell of time. In front of the porch was a long wooden chair, its backrest chipped, but there was always someone sitting there at precisely 7 o'clock every morning, with a glass of water placed on his left hand, and a gaze fixed on the dark green mountains. On the horizon, Eli Brody wasn't waiting for anyone, nor was he expecting anything. Each morning began like a ritual. He sat up in bed, placing his right foot down first, then reaching for the titanium prosthetic leg propped against the headboard. The movement repeated, cold, mechanical, as if his soul had left his body, leaving this body to operate on inertia. After attaching the leg, he put on a worn hoodie and walked slowly to the kitchen. Tap water trickled into a glass. No coffee, no tea, just a habit of pouring something into his hand to feel like he could still hold on to something in life. Then he stepped onto the porch, sat down on the chair, and took small sips. His eyes no longer held the look of a 29-year-old, but that of someone who had survived too long after the day he should not have returned. The distant mountain range was always cold. Even when the sun shone, for Eli, it was a region of memories that no one could understand. Like the Afghanistan battlefield of the past, there he had left behind a part of his body, and everything that made him human, all that remained here. A body that knew how to move, how to sit and breathe, how to be silent. The whole town called him the cripple on Pine Hill, though no one said it to his face. He heard it, but did not react. The postman stopped at the gate, dropped off the mail, and left. Children no longer climbed up to play around the house, and Eli, he thought it was better that way. Fewer people, fewer stories, fewer people, fewer pretenses. He used to have a girlfriend, Kelly. Before enlisting, they were planning to get married after his first tour. But when he returned, his left leg was gone, and the look in his eyes no longer belonged to her. Kelly tried for a few months, then quietly left. She didn't say anything, but Eli understood. It wasn't because she was cowardly. It was because he had closed all the doors, even to himself. It had been 3 years since that day, and Eli still sat here, living, but no longer present in anyone's life that afternoon. As Eli leaned his head against the chair frame, an old pickup truck stopped in front of the yard. The engine rumbled, then died. There was the sound of a car door slamming shut. He didn't turn his head, but he recognized that footstep, steady, slightly heavy, with a bit of awkwardness. Like someone who had learned to walk again after surgery. Eli, a deep, hoarse voice called. "Are you even alive in there?" Eli still didn't turn his head and took a sip of water. Double quotes, Jonas. He replied softly. "Can you skip the greeting like some cop just discovered a dead body?" A dry chuckle echoed behind him. Jonas, his childhood friend, now the town's veterinarian, walked up. His face was tanned, his beard stubbly, his shoes covered in red dirt. "I have a job," Jonas said, without beating round the bush, something no one else in this godforsaken town is willing to do. Eli frowned. "I'm not a veterinarian. Don't need you to be. Just need you to be a dog handler." Eli turned completely around, looking at Jonas for the first time that day. "What?" "Max, service dog. 3 legs, just discharged. No one will take him. if there's no place for him before Friday. They're going to put him down. Eli was silent. The wind blew through the porch, carrying the smell of rotting wood and faded memories. He turned away. I'm not a rescue shelter. You're the only one who understands him. You both were there. Same kind of loss. No, I don't keep dogs. Don't need friends. Don't need anything that can die before me. Jonas clicked his tongue, placing a file on the table. He doesn't have anyone. Eli, just like you, if you let him die, you're killing again. Eli stared at the file, which contained a photo of a golden-furred Malinois. One hind leg amputated to the shoulder. His eyes were not sad, but lacked vitality. He turned away and took a deep breath. 1 week, he said, his voice dry. I'll keep him for exactly 1 week. Jonas smiled, nodded, and walked away without another word. The truck started, kicking up dust that gradually disappeared beyond the slope. So what the hell is keeping you standing? How? Eli muttered the question as he looked down at the dog lying motionless on the wooden floor. He didn't answer, of course, but he didn't turn away either. The iron folding cage Jonas left behind was discarded by Eli in the backyard, abandoned among the pine needles, and the dog, Max, refused to lie in it. As soon as he was released from the leash, he found a corner of the house next to the fireplace, lay down on his side, and curled his remaining 3 legs close to his stomach. No barking, no whining, just watching. That gaze made Eli uncomfortable. He stood by the kitchen counter, holding a bag of kibble. He intended to pour it on the floor, but stopped. It felt like he was doing something ridiculous. He took a ceramic bowl, poured cold water, scooped out a portion of the food, and placed it in front of the dog. Without saying a word, Max didn't move. Only after Eli turned away did he gently turn his body, each movement cautious, as if avoiding disturbing the host. Eli stepped onto the porch, sat down on the chair. Like every morning, but this time, he was no longer alone. There was the sound of clicking claws behind him, steady, but offbeat. Every 3 beats there was a small pause, the sound of deficiency. He looked ahead and said sternly, "Don't think I'm going to talk to you." Max sat down by the door frame, exactly 2 steps away from Eli. Not too close, not too far. The wind blew through the pine trees, sweeping his fur to one side. He still didn't bark, just breathed, slowly, heavily. Eli closed his eyes and leaned his head against the back of the chair, but his mind was no longer as quiet as usual. Something was throbbing, not in the prosthetic leg, but deeper, where people usually keep the things they've tried to forget. That afternoon, Eli remade the bed sheets in the living room. He didn't know why Max was still lying on the floor, but the act of cleaning made him feel less tense, as if he needed to rearrange something not in the house, but in his head. When he bent down to pick up the old blanket from under the table, Max got up. He turned around reflexively. The dog looked him straight in the eye, a look that was neither pleading nor fearful, just existing. "Don't pretend to understand me," Eli said. "I don't even understand myself anymore." Max didn't move, but when Eli stood up, he approached, slowly. His head was lowered, his tail tucked close to his butt. He placed his muzzle on the side of Ellie's left knee. Genuinely, it took Eli a moment to realize. He wasn't leaning on the prosthetic leg, but on the other one, asterisk for some reason. That made his heart clench. Night. It got cold suddenly. Eli wrapped himself in a fleece blanket and sat huddled in the chair. Max lay curled up in the corner of the room. He looked at him for a long time, then suddenly remembered the spare prosthetic leg still in the storage room. He stood up and walked towards the back, slow steps, not because of pain, but because of hesitation. He opened the door, turned on the light, but the light flickered. One by one, things caught his eye: the torn backpack, the skewed photo of the unit, and the unfinished letter from Joey, the deceased comrade. He had never dared to read. He quietly turned back, holding an old dog-hair-covered pad. The thing Jonas forgot. He placed the pad in front of the fireplace. He didn't call Max's name. He didn't wave. But just a few minutes later, the sound of limping footsteps echoed again. Max lay down on the pad and sighed softly. Eli didn't say anything, but he sat back on the chair for a while longer, without turning on the TV, without putting on headphones like every night, just listening to the breath of himself and of another creature, for the first time existing in the same space without making him want to leave. When the room lights went out, Eli went to bed and turned his back to the wall. A wind whistled through the window pane. A soft groan echoed. Max shifting. Eli couldn't sleep. Something in his heart began to stir, small, shapeless, but no longer as quiet as before. Max never went ahead of Eli, whether it was early in the morning in the empty forest or in the afternoon around the yard. He always kept a distance of exactly one step behind, silently and steadily, as if afraid that a wrong step would cause his master to turn back and abandon him. Eli noticed that on the third day, when he decided to try walking further than the dirt road leading to the back of the hill, for the past few months, he had only roamed round the yard, the porch steps, and the kitchen, limiting his world to 30 steps. But that morning, something urged him to cross the wooden post marking the path, and Max silently followed, without barking, without urging, without disturbing. Ellie's prosthetic leg was still not used to the rocks. Every time pebbles crunched under his shoe, his body froze, his hand trembling slightly, but Max only needed to touch him with his shoulder, not hard, not deliberately, and he would take another step. They were silent for almost 50 minutes, until Eli suddenly sat down at the base of a tree, not because of fatigue, but because memories flooded back. Memories that didn't need the courtesy to ask if one was ready to recall them. "This place is like the hills in Helmand," Eli said softly. His eyes fixed on the horizon. Max sat down beside him, his head held high. There were trees like this too. Red soil, blue sky. But there, I couldn't hear the wind. A long silence. The wind gently swayed the pine branches. Eli looked at Max, but the dog didn't move. "We had a guy named Joey. He used to tell stupid stories before missions. You know that kind of guy. Laughs too loud, talks too much. But when he died, it was eerily quiet." Max lowered his head. It was unclear whether he understood or was simply resting, but the way he didn't take his eyes off Eli made him feel, for the first time, like he wasn't talking into the void. Joey stepped on a mine. The sentence came out like a bullet without needing to be chambered. There was only half of him left, the rest splattered on my face. Hot blood, extremely hot, and the smell, like burnt skin. Eli clenched his jaw, His hands gripped the rough bark of the tree so tightly that it drew blood. After that, I couldn't hear anything anymore. I just saw that my leg wasn't whole. Then I heard screams, not mine. Someone else's. Max shifted, placing a paw on Ellie's thigh. His warmth seeped through the fabric like a reminder. You're still here. That evening, Eli opened the yellowed letter. The one he always ignored every time he cleaned the cupboard. The envelope bore the name Joey Miller, in slanted, playful handwriting. The letter was sent from the military camp in Kandahar, 2 weeks before Joey died. If I die, don't cry too much, because your face looks even uglier when you frown than my feet. But seriously, if I die, you have to live like you owe me a beer, a climb to the top of the hill, and at least one dog. Eli laughed. The laugh broke out dryly like rotten wood, then fell into silence. He folded the letter, placed it on his chest, and lay still. Max lay at the foot of the bed as soon as Eli turned off the light. He sighed softly, like a habit, or like a good-night wish from those who weren't good at using sound. The next morning, they went for a walk again. This time, a child appeared on the road. The boy had blonde hair, his left arm amputated to the elbow. He wore a dark blue hoodie. Standing on the side of the road with an old woman who was picking firewood, Eli intended to keep walking, avoiding the usual curious gaze. But Max stopped and turned his head. His stubby tail wagged slightly. Then he walked towards the boy, slowly, cautiously. Without pressing close, the boy wasn't afraid. He sat down and held out his remaining hand. Max sniffed and then gently nuzzled into the boy's palm. His name is Sam, the old woman said, with a kind smile. He loves dogs, Eli nodded, and said nothing. Sam looked up and asked, Are you a soldier? Eli looked at the boy's amputated arm. Then he looked down at his own leg. After a long moment, he replied, Yeah, I used to be a soldier. I want to be a soldier too. But I don't have enough hands. Eli bent down and placed his hand on Max's head. The feeling of the warm fur, soft but firm, made his breathing slow down. You don't need enough hands to be brave, kid. You just need not to give up. That night, Eli wrote a small note and placed it beside Joey's old letter. I haven't had a beer yet, nor have I climbed the hill, but the dog is here. He folded it and placed it in an old notebook. Then he stepped onto the porch and looked towards the hill, where the one-armed boy had waved to him without hesitation, behind him. Max quietly sat down. Once again, both looked in the same direction. No one needed to say anything. There are days when the sky doesn't need to forewarn anything. It just changes color. The sky was still pale with sunlight in the early morning, a few timid golden rays squeezing through the pine trees behind the house. But by noon, the clouds had pulled down darkly as if someone had just pulled an old blanket to cover a past no one wanted to evoke. Eli stood in front of the window, holding a cold glass of water, silently watching the black clouds gather over the distant mountain range. Max lay by the windowsill, his head resting between his front paws. He also looked outside, silent as his master. The wind began to whip at the window pane. Leaves fell in large patches, spiraling down the hill path. Eli said nothing, only frowned slightly. He didn't like rain. Rain made the ground soft, the rocks slippery, making his steps unsteady. But deeper than that, The rain brought musty memories, the kind of memories that never dried, never cleaned. There was the sound of a car stopping outside the yard. Eli didn't turn his head. He knew it was Dot. Jonas walked in as if the house never had a door. His coat was soaked. He was holding an old envelope, yellowed and softened by time. He placed the letter on the table and looked at Eli. "Joey's last letter. I've been holding it for you since you were in the ICU, but you never asked." Eli turned round slowly, his eyes ice cold. "I don't need anything else to feel like I survived instead of him," Jonas sighed, his voice softer. "You're not living instead of him, Eli. You're living with him." He left the letter and left. Without a word of compulsion, Eli watched the door close. A long moment later, he approached the table. The envelope was wrapped in a plastic bag. On the smudging could still be read 2 lines. "For Eli, if I don't make it back." His hand trembled as he opened the letter. Each word passed slowly, heavy as the last sound before an explosion. Asterisk, "Hey you stubborn bastard. You're reading this means I'm not alive to yell at your face anymore. Shit happens. I'm not afraid to die, but I'm afraid you don't know how to live. You always follow orders, always keep silent, always leave the pain behind. But Eli, if I die, don't let only me die. I live in you. We're soldiers, right? Soldiers don't leave each other behind." The letter slipped from Ellie's hand, fell to the ground. Max still lay quietly, not taking his eyes off him. That gaze, not judging, not pitying, just simply being there, was what made Eli let out a dry laugh, then shatter into a sigh. He quietly opened the cabinet and pulled out a small bottle of liquor, the one he had hidden from months ago, never touched, just in case. In case of what? He didn't know. Maybe in case of a day like today. The bottle was heavy. His throat burned. Each sip was a punch to his chest, not because of the alcohol, but because of what came rushing back. Gunfire, screams. Joey's eyes rolled back before everything turned black. Eli stepped outside. The rain had started, not torrential, but each drop heavy, hitting his face like someone was slapping him awake. His prosthetic leg slipped on the wooden floor. He hobbled along, one step at a time, without a coat, without crutches, just needing to leave the house that was tightening round him like a rotten cocoon. Max followed, without being called, without asking permission. The dirt road behind the house was dark under the rain. Water pooled. The ground was soft and wobbly. Eli walked aimlessly, only knowing to walk. Each step was a curse, a shout swallowed back into his stomach. He stopped at the bend where the hill opened up into a large clearing, where people used to set up summer camps. Now only empty ground. A few rusty iron stakes remained. Eli slumped down, tied to the bone. Rain fell on his face, mingling with his hair, his beard, the deep lines round his eyes. He screamed, his voice hoarse. "You want me to live? Then you be here and live. I'm tired, Joey. You died easy. But me, what am I staying for?" There was no answer. Only the sound of rain and the sound of his own heart beating in his head. Asterisk, he fell back on the ground, his back covered in mud. The sky was grey as a night that refused to fall. Then Max approached, silent as a shadow. No barking, no wagging tail. He lay down next to him, slowly, tilting his body to cover half of Eli, his wet back pressed against his chest. His head rested against his chest. His breath labored from the cold, from the wind, but not leaving its position. 1 minute, 10 minutes, 1 hour. Max didn't leave. The next morning, when the first rays of sunlight pierced through the gray clouds, the neighbor named Bill, the old man who raised cows on the other side of the hill, passed by. He saw a motionless figure lying in the middle of the clearing, and a dog, soaked, his eyes wide open, lying close by, as if keeping the other from melting away with the night rain. Bill shouted for help, then rushed over. Eli was still breathing, weak, slow pulse, shivering, but alive. Max still hadn't left his position. Eli woke up that afternoon in his own house, bandaged up by Jonas and the old nurse from the clinic. The ceiling was still the old wooden ceiling, but this time he looked at it as if he was seeing something that truly existed, not just a backdrop for a long ending. When he tried to sit up, something heavy pressed on his leg. It was Max. He lay under the edge of the bed, his eyes closed, his back still caked with dry mud, but his ears still perked slightly. As if just by Eli breathing hard, he would open his eyes immediately. Eli sighed. He reached out, for the first time, not because he had to touch, but because he wanted to. He gently stroked Max's spine, down his side, where the leg was amputated close. "I'm sorry," he whispered softly. Max opened his eyes. No reaction, just watching. A gaze that made Eli feel like he was talking to a person, not an animal. "Thank you for not leaving me." His voice was choked. It was unclear whether it was from the cold or from something broken inside, falling out slowly, the tears that he hadn't let anyone see for 3 years, and for the first time. Eli Brody, former Marine, lost a leg, lost a friend, lost himself, let the emotions that he thought had died with the explosion flood out. Without hiding, without suppressing, Max shifted, pressing closer, as if he were also breathing that breath, the breath of old soldiers, not crying before the enemy, but crying when they knew they were alive because someone hadn't left. The first thing Eli did when he woke up completely wasn't calling anyone, nor was it sitting up. He turned to Max. The dog was still lying by the bed, and touched the warm, dark fur. There was no one in the room, no comforting words, just the quiet presence of a creature who hadn't abandoned him, even when he wanted himself to be abandoned. He didn't know why he had survived that night. Maybe it was because Jonas came in time. Maybe it was because Max kept him warm. Maybe it was just simply because for the first time in his life he wasn't trying to die anymore. On the 3rd day since then, Eli stood up without anyone's help. He stepped onto the porch, slowly, but surely. Max walked beside him, his front leg lifted a little higher to balance. Each step he took was an offbeat rhythm, 3 legs but not weak at all. Just like Eli. Jonas came, bringing coffee and a look that didn't need words. "The one-armed boy named Sam asked about you," Jonas said. He even asked if Max would teach him how to train dogs. Eli smiled. The smile wasn't forced, wasn't broken. Just a longer than usual exhalation, with something lightened in his chest. "Teach dogs is teaching people how to stand up," he murmured. Maybe it's worth a try." 2 months later, the wooden house had a small wooden sign hanging at the gate. "Rehabilitation Training Center for children and rescue dogs here. No one walks alone." Jonas was in charge of medical care. Eli was in charge of training, and Max Max became a symbol. The kids called him three-leg trainer. Every newcomer widened their eyes when they saw a dog with one leg amputated still jumping through hoops, sitting on command, and most importantly, never leaving the person who needed him. Eli no longer slept much during the day. He woke up early, went out to the yard, checked the equipment, and organized the lessons. Every evening, he wrote down the kids' expressions, planning separately for each one. Sam was the first student. The boy was missing his left arm, but was brave, bright, and had eyes that looked strangely like Joey's. When Max walked beside the boy, the two deficiencies, one leg, one arm, made their steps look fuller than ever. One afternoon, Sam asked Eli when they were both sitting under the shade of a pine tree, "Mr. Eli, do you think I can become a soldier?" Eli looked at Max. Then he looked at the boy's amputated arm. "You don't need to be a soldier," he replied. "You just need not to leave anyone behind. That's enough." Sam nodded. His remaining hand gently patted Max's head. The dog closed his eyes, slightly, enjoying the presence. A few months later, Eli began to write down what he had never dared to mention. He didn't write by date. He didn't write like a diary, but as if he were talking to Joey, to Max, to himself of the years of silence. "I still owe you a climb to the top of the hill," he wrote. "And beer is probably very bitter, but I will try. And the dog, he doesn't go anywhere. I'm grateful that he never walks faster than me." One early spring morning, Eli led the group up the hill, the old hill, where he had collapsed in the rain. The grass had grown back. The ground was harder. The wet smell was fading. The kids ran round everywhere. Max walked slowly, no longer jumping as high as before, but still kept his eyes bright. Eli sat down, his eyes looking up at the sky. The sunlight covered his head in gold. No longer heavy, no longer evading. A child turned and asked, "Mr. Eli, do you walk slow because of your prosthetic leg or because of Max?" Eli turned and stroked Max's head. The dog was now lying gently beside him, his eyes squinting in the sunlight. "I used to think I couldn't walk anymore," he said slowly. "But Max never let me stop." The afternoon came down. The group returned. The kids laughed, their voices echoing throughout the slope. Eli and Max were the last two shadows on the path. One tall, one short. One had lost all faith. One had never spoken, but both chose not to turn back against the day's final sky. The wind blowing through the pine trees sounded like a whisper. We are still here, and still moving on.